She's just a secretary. Kill her last so she can watch. The bullet punched through the windshield, and Staff Sergeant Rivera's head snapped back dead before he even heard the shot. The convoy ground to a halt. Then a second round hit the gunner. Then a third. Somewhere in the hills, an enemy sniper was picking them off like animals, and every single SEAL on that road knew they were next. Nobody could find him. Nobody could stop him. But what none of them knew, what none of them could have possibly imagined, was that the quiet girl sitting in the communications truck, the one they joked about, the one they called the secretary, she knew exactly where that shooter was hiding. And she was about to do something that would make every man on that base question everything they thought they knew about war, about women, and about the ghost blood running through her veins. If this story doesn't give you chills, nothing will. Subscribe to this channel right now, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let me see just how far this story travels. The morning Kira Ashford arrived at Forward Operating Base Liberty, nobody noticed. That was the point. She stepped off the transport with her head down, her duffel slung low over one shoulder, and her boots already caked in Afghan dust. She was small for a soldier, 5'6", lean, the kind of frame that made senior enlisted men look twice and then dismiss her entirely. She liked it that way. Master Chief Donovan Brennan was standing near the operations tent when the new arrivals filed in. He had a clipboard. He had a sunburn. He had 17 years of combat deployments written into every line on his face, and he did not have time for replacements who couldn't carry their weight. "Ashford," he called out, not looking up. "Here, Master Chief." He glanced at her, took in the communications patch on her sleeve, took in the rest of her in about half a second, and made his judgment the way men like him always did. "You're on comms relay. Sergeant Holt will show you the setup. Don't touch anything you don't understand." "Understood, Master Chief." That was it. No welcome speech, no orientation, no handshake. Kira picked up her bag and followed a stocky sergeant named Holt across the base to a plywood shack filled with radio equipment, tangled cables, and the lingering smell of cigarettes and stale coffee. Holt kicked a chair toward her. "This is your kingdom, princess. You talk into the box, you write down what comes back, and you don't leave this room unless the building's on fire. We clear. Crystal." He stared at her for a moment, waiting for something. A flinch, a complaint, some sign that she was going to be a problem. When nothing came, he shrugged and walked out. Kira sat down. She put on the headset. She powered up the equipment with the kind of muscle memory that comes from doing something 10,000 times. And within 40 minutes, she had reorganized the entire communications log, fixed a frequency overlap that had been causing static for 2 weeks, and established a backup channel that nobody had thought to set up. When Holt came back an hour later with coffee, he stopped in the doorway. "You did all this?" It needed doing. He looked at the screens. He looked at her. Then he set the coffee down without another word and left again. Something about the way she handled that equipment made him uneasy, though he couldn't have said why. She was too fast, too sure. Like she'd been doing this her whole life, which she had, but not the part he was seeing. The part he wasn't seeing was buried so deep that even Kira herself tried to pretend it didn't exist. Her father's name was Marcus Ashford. If you served in any branch between 1985 and 2009, you knew that name. If you didn't know it, you knew the stories. 312 confirmed kills across 4 theaters of war. They called him the Carpenter because he said every shot was like driving a nail. One strike, clean, final. He could put a round through a quarter at 800 yards, and he did it once on a bet just to shut up a Marine who said Army snipers couldn't shoot. Marcus Ashford was not a man who missed. He was not a man who hesitated. And he was not a man who lived to see his daughter grow up because a roadside bomb outside Fallujah took him when Kira was 16 years old. She was at school when the notification team came to the house. Her mother answered the door. Kira came home to find her mother sitting on the kitchen floor, still in her work clothes, holding the folded flag they'd given her, like it was the only thing keeping her from falling through the earth. Kira sat down next to her. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Something inside her had locked shut the moment she saw her mother's face, and it stayed locked for a very long time. The funeral was full of uniforms. Generals, old squad mates, a governor. They all said the same things. Hero, legend, sacrifice. Kira stood at the graveside in a black dress and black shoes and listened to every word, and none of it meant anything to her because none of them knew him the way she did. They knew the sniper. She knew the man who taught her to shoot her first rifle at age 9, standing behind her in the backyard with his hands over hers, whispering, "Breathe out slow, baby girl. The bullet goes where your breath goes." By 12, she could outshoot every boy at the local range. By 14, she was competing in regional marksmanship tournaments under a fake name because Marcus didn't want attention on his family. She won 3 of them. She placed second in the other 2, and both times Marcus told her he was prouder of the losses because she learned more from missing than from hitting. "Anybody can pull a trigger," he told her once cleaning his rifle at the kitchen table while her mother cooked dinner. "The hard part is knowing when not to." She remembered that. She remembered everything he ever said about shooting, about patience, about the weight of a life on the other end of a scope. She remembered because after he died, remembering was all she had. Her mother made her promise. It was 3 days after the funeral. They were in the kitchen again, the same kitchen where Marcus had cleaned his rifles and told his stories. And her mother looked at her with eyes that had aged 10 years and 72 hours. "Promise me, Kira. Promise you what? You will never pick up a rifle again. Not for sport, not for duty, not for anything. I already lost him. I will not lose you to the same thing that took your father." Kira wanted to argue. She wanted to say that the rifle didn't take her father, that a bomb did. That shooting was in her blood, the same way her eye color and her stubborn streak were in her blood. But her mother was shaking, and her mother was broken, and Kira was 16 years old, and she had just buried her hero, so she said the only thing she could say. "I promise, Mom." 7 years she kept that promise. 7 years she walked past firing ranges without stopping. 7 years she listened to soldiers brag about their marksmanship scores and said nothing. 7 years she swallowed the itch in her hands every time she heard the crack of a rifle in the distance. And she told herself it was enough to be close to the fight without being in it. She enlisted at 21. Communications. Her mother cried, but she accepted it because comms wasn't combat. Comms was radios and computers and headsets. Comms was safe. That was the deal. Kira would serve her country the way her father served his, but she would do it from behind a desk, behind a wall, behind anything that kept her away from a trigger. And it worked. For 3 deployments, it worked. She was good at comms. She was better than good. She had an instinct for signal patterns and frequency analysis that her instructor said was borderline savant. She could listen to enemy radio chatter and tell you within minutes how many fighters were talking, where they were positioned, and what they were planning. Her reports were so accurate that intelligence officers started requesting her by name. She was promoted twice. She was commended 4 times. She was exactly what the Army wanted her to be, and she was absolutely miserable. Because every night when the base went quiet and she was alone in her bunk, she could hear her father's voice. "The bullet goes where your breath goes." She never told anyone about Marcus. She never mentioned the tournaments. She never said a word about the fact that she could field strip, reassemble, and zero a bolt-action sniper rifle faster than any man on any base she'd ever been stationed at. That part of her was dead. She'd killed it herself, and she intended to keep it buried. FOB Liberty was supposed to be her last deployment. 4 months then home. She'd already started thinking about what came next. Maybe college, maybe a government job, something quiet, something her mother would be proud of. But the war had other plans. The first week was routine. She ran comms, logged reports, and kept her head down. The base was full, maybe 200 personnel, a mix of Army regulars, and a SEAL team that operated out of a separate compound on the east side. The SEALs kept to themselves. They had their own chain of command, their own briefings, their own everything. They were polite enough when they crossed paths with the regular Army, but there was a wall there and everyone knew it. Duke Brennan ran the SEAL compound with the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to raise its voice. He'd been in special operations for almost 2 decades. He'd lost count of the missions. He'd lost friends. He'd lost a marriage. What he hadn't lost was his ability to read people, and from the moment Kira Ashford walked onto his base, something about her nagged at him. He mentioned it to his senior chief, a block of granite named Tommy Voss, over dinner one night. The new comms girl. Voss didn't look up from his food. "What about her? She walks wrong. She walks wrong. She walks like someone who's been trained to move through terrain. Head on a swivel, feet quiet. She scans rooms before she enters them. She positions herself near exits. That's not calm school behavior, Tommy. Voss chewed his rice. Maybe she's just cautious. Maybe. Brennan picked up his coffee from, or maybe there's something in her file that we should be reading. You want me to pull it? Not yet, just keep an eye on her. Voss kept an eye on her, so did Brennan. And so did a young SEAL named Petty Officer First Class Ryan Cole, who had noticed Kira for entirely different reasons. Cole was 28, square-jawed and good-looking in the way that young operators often are, and he made his first approach on Kira's fourth day. You're the new comms specialist. That's right. Cole, Ryan Cole, SEAL Team 4. Good for you. He blinked. That wasn't the usual response. I was just going to say, if you ever need anything from our side, I'm your guy. I need you to stop blocking the signal repeater you're leaning on. Cole looked down. He was in fact leaning on a signal repeater. He stepped aside. Kira adjusted a cable behind it without looking at him. Thanks, she said and went back to work. Cole walked back to the SEAL compound trying to figure out what just happened. He told his buddy, a breacher named Diaz, about the exchange. Diaz laughed. She shut you down in 4 seconds. That might be a record. She didn't shut me down. She just wasn't interested in talking. Brother, that's the definition of shutting you down. Cole didn't bring it up again, but he didn't stop watching her either, because what Brennan had noticed from a distance, Cole was noticing up close. The comms specialist moved like a fighter. She carried herself like someone who knew things she wasn't supposed to know. And twice when the firing range lit up on the other side of the base, Cole saw her stop, close her eyes, and tilt her head like she was listening to music no one else could hear. 2 weeks passed. Kira fell into the rhythm of phobe liberty, the way she fell into every deployment. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. She intercepted enemy communications, imploded coordinates and flagged anomalies, and did everything she was paid to do, and she did it better than anyone expected. Then the intelligence briefing changed everything. It was a Tuesday, 1600 hours. The operations tent was full. Brennan was there with his full team. The Army company commander, a captain named Torres, was running the brief. There was a map on the wall, and Kira was called in because the mission required a forward communications relay, and that meant someone from her section had to go outside the wire. Torres pointed to a valley on the map. This is the route. The convoy runs through here, drops supplies at Firebase Delta, and returns. Standard escort. 2 armored Humvees, 1 supply truck, 1 MRA for the SEAL element. Kira looked at the map. Her blood went cold. She knew that valley. Not from any briefing, not from any intelligence report. She knew it because her father had written about it. In the journal she found after he died, Marcus Ashford described that exact terrain in detail. He called it a coffin. He said any sniper worth his salt could set up on the eastern ridge, use the natural rock formations as cover, and pick off an entire column before anyone could identify his position. He wrote it like a warning, like he knew someday someone he loved might need to hear it. Specialist Ashford, you'll set up the relay here. Torres pointed to a position near the valley's southern entrance. You'll have a clear line back to base in direct comms with the convoy element. Kira stared at the map. Her mouth was dry. Her hands, the hands that hadn't touched a rifle in 7 years, were trembling under the table where nobody could see them. Sir, she said carefully, that relay position is exposed. If there's contact from the eastern ridge, whoever is at that relay point has no cover and no egress route. Torres frowned. It's the best signal position. That's your job, specialist. Yes, sir, I understand. I'm just noting that the terrain on the eastern ridge provides elevated sight lines to the entire valley floor. If this convoy takes fire, the relay position will be one of the first targets. Brennan, who had been leaning against a tent pole with his arms crossed, lifted his head. He looked at Kira the way a hawk looks at something moving in the grass. How do you know the sight lines from the eastern ridge, specialist? Every eye in the tent turned to her. Kira felt the weight of them all. She felt the weight of 7 years of silence pressing down on her chest like a boot. Topographical analysis, Master Chief. It's part of my communications training. Identifying signal vulnerabilities often requires understanding line-of-sight terrain features. It was a good answer. It was a practiced answer. It was also in every way that mattered a lie. Brennan held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. Captain Torres, she's right about the exposure. Let's adjust the relay position 50 meters south behind the rock outcrop. That gives her signal coverage and hard cover. Torres agreed. The brief continued. Kira sat in her chair and forced her hands to stop shaking and told herself that this was fine, that she'd flagged the vulnerability and done her job, and that was the end of it. But her father's journal was in her footlocker, and the page describing that valley was dog-eared. And the last line Marcus Ashford had written about that terrain read in his careful, blocky handwriting, "If they ever send anyone I love through this place, God help whoever is waiting on that ridge because my daughter will find them." He wrote it like he knew, like somehow from wherever the dead go, Marcus Ashford had seen this exact moment coming and left his daughter the only weapon he could knowledge wrapped inside a warning, wrapped inside a prophecy. The convoy was scheduled for Thursday at 0600. Kira had 48 hours. She spent the first 12 reading every piece of intelligence she could access about enemy activity in that valley. She cross-referenced radio intercepts from the past month. She plotted frequency spikes and communication clusters. She built a picture that no one asked her to build because no one knew she could. And what she saw made her stomach turn. There was a pattern, a clear, unmistakable pattern. Every time coalition forces moved through that valley, enemy communications spiked exactly 6 hours before the convoy departed. Someone on the inside was feeding information. Someone was telling the enemy exactly when and where the targets would be. Kira sat alone in her plywood shack at 2 in the morning, staring at the data on her screen, and she knew with absolute certainty that the Thursday convoy was rolling into a kill zone. She also knew that if she walked into Brennan's office and told him this, he would ask how she connected those dots so fast, and she would have to explain that she wasn't just a communications specialist, that she was the daughter of the most lethal sniper in modern military history. And that tactical pattern recognition was something she'd been trained to do since before she could drive a car. She picked up the phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. Then she heard her father's voice, clear as daylight, as if he were standing right behind her. "Anybody can pull a trigger, baby girl. The hard part is knowing when not to." Kira dialed Brennan's extension. It rang 4 times. His voice was gravel and sleep. "This better be important." "Master Chief, this is Specialist Ashford. I need 15 minutes of your time. Right now." A long pause. She could hear him breathing. She could hear him deciding. "My office. 5 minutes." She was there in 3. He was there in 4. He sat down behind his desk in a t-shirt and cargo pants, his hair pressed flat on one side from the pillow, and he looked at her with those hawk eyes and said, "Talk." She talked. She showed him the data. She showed him the communication spikes. She showed him the pattern and the timeline and the correlation, and she watched his face change from skepticism to attention to something cold and hard that she recognized because she'd seen it on her father's face 100 times. It was the face of a man who just realized someone was trying to kill his people. "How long did it take you to build this analysis?" 4 hours. 4 hours. He leaned back. "My intelligence section has been looking at this area for 3 weeks. You built a more complete threat picture in 4 hours than they did in 3 weeks. I had access to the raw signal data, Master Chief. Sometimes the picture is clearer when you're closer to the source." He studied her. The silence stretched out between them like a wire being pulled tight. "Who are you, Ashford?" "I'm a communications specialist, Master Chief." "No, who are you really?" Her heart was hammering. Her hands were steady. That was her father's gift. The ability to be terrified on the inside and absolutely still on the outside. "I'm someone who doesn't want to see that convoy die in a valley on Thursday morning." Brennan looked at her for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Tommy Voss. Then he called Captain Torres. Then he started making plans, and Kira stood in his office and watched a man she'd known for 2 weeks do exactly what her father would have done. Take the warning, trust the source, and prepare for a fight. But neither of them knew yet just how bad that fight was going to be. Neither of them knew that the enemy sniper waiting on that ridge had been planning this ambush for 2 months. And neither of them knew that in 48 hours, Kira Ashford was going to break the only promise she'd ever made to her mother and become the thing she'd spent 7 years running from. The clock was ticking. The valley was waiting. And somewhere in the mountains, a man with a rifle was counting the hours until the Americans came rolling in right where he wanted them. 41 hours before the convoy rolled out, Kira couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the plywood ceiling, listening to the bass breathe around her, generators humming, boots on gravel somewhere in the distance. The occasional burst of laughter from the SEAL compound. Normal sounds, safe sounds, but nothing felt safe anymore because every time she closed her eyes, she saw that valley. And every time she saw that valley, she saw the kill zones her father had mapped in his journal. And every time she saw those kill zones, she saw bodies. At 0300, she gave up on sleep. She pulled on her boots and walked to the comm shack. The night shift operator, a kid named Perkins, who was barely old enough to buy beer, looked up when she came in. "Can't sleep, specialist? Move over." He moved. She sat down and plugged into the intercept feed. For 2 hours, she listened to enemy radio traffic filtering through the noise, isolating the voices she'd been tracking for days. There were 4 distinct call signs operating in the valley sector. 4 cells. She'd identified 3 of them. The 4th was new. The 4th was disciplined. Short transmissions. Encrypted bursts. Professional. At 0515, the 4th call sign transmitted a single phrase that made Kira's blood freeze. "The carpenter's table is set." She ripped off her headset and stared at the console. Perkins looked at her. "You okay? Get Master Chief Brennan on the line. Now." "It's 5 in the morning. Now, Perkins." Something in her voice made the kid move fast. Brennan answered on the second ring, already awake, because men like him never really sleep on deployment. "Ashford, what do you have?" "They use the word carpenter, Master Chief." Silence on the line. Dead silence. "Say that again." "4th cell, the one I flagged 2 days ago. They transmitted, 'The carpenter's table is set.' They're using my father's call sign." She hadn't meant to say it like that. She hadn't meant to say "my father" at all. The words came out before she could catch them, ripped from somewhere deep in her chest by a fear she couldn't control. And once they were out, they hung in the air between them like smoke. Brennan's voice dropped low. "Your father's call sign. Marcus Ashford, Master Sergeant. Sniper Section 75th Ranger Regiment. They called him the Carpenter. 312 confirmed kills. He's been dead for 7 years, and somehow the enemy is using his name as an operational code word for this ambush." Another silence. Longer this time. She could hear Brennan processing, recalibrating, rebuilding his entire understanding of who she was. "You're Marcus Ashford's daughter." "Yes, Master Chief." "The Marcus Ashford. There's only one. And you've been sitting in my comm shack for 3 weeks, and you didn't think that was information I needed. It wasn't relevant until now. Specialist, everything about you just became relevant. My office, 10 minutes. Bring everything you have." She brought everything. The signal analysis, the frequency charts, the communication patterns, and tucked under her arm, wrapped in a brown cloth she'd carried through 3 deployments, her father's journal. She'd never shown it to anyone. Not her mother, not her friends, not a single commanding officer in her entire career. She set it on Brennan's desk like she was setting down a piece of her own heart. Brennan opened it. He read the entry about the valley. His jaw tightened with every line. When he reached the last paragraph, the one where Marcus wrote about his daughter, Brennan closed the journal and looked up at Kira. And for the first time since she'd arrived at FOB Liberty, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't suspicion or authority. It was recognition. "He knew you'd end up here." "My father knew a lot of things. Can you do what he did?" The question hit her like a round to the chest. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She closed it. She tried again. "I promised my mother I would never pick up a rifle again." Brennan leaned forward. "That's not what I asked you. I asked if you can do what he did." Kira looked at the journal on his desk. She looked at her father's handwriting, the careful block letters of a man who measured everything twice before committing. She felt the itch in her hands, the one she'd been fighting for 7 years, the phantom weight of a stock against her shoulder, the ghost pressure of a trigger under her finger. Yes. One word, one syllable, and it changed everything. Brennan picked up his phone and called Tommy Voss. Then he called Captain Torres. Then he called a meeting that wasn't on any official schedule, in a room that wasn't on any official map. At 0637, men sat around a folding table in the back of the SEAL compound, and Kira stood in front of them, the only woman, the only non-SEAL, the only person in the room whose hands were shaking. Voss spoke first. "Master Chief, with respect, she's a comms specialist. She's Marcus Ashford's daughter." The room went quiet. Every head turned. Ryan Cole, who was sitting in his back with his arms crossed, dropped his arms. Diaz, the breacher, sat up straight. A sniper named Patterson, who had been cleaning his fingernails with a knife, stopped mid-stroke. "The Marcus Ashford," Patterson said. "How many times are people going to ask that?" Kira said. Patterson stared at her. "Ma'am, I have a poster of your father in my workshop at home. He's the reason I became a sniper." "Then you know what he was capable of." "I know what he was capable of. What are you capable of?" Kira met his eyes. Patterson was 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle and training and ego. He had 47 confirmed kills of his own. He was the best shooter on the team, and he knew it, and everyone in the room knew it. "I guess we're about to find out," she said. Brennan shut down the murmuring before it could start. "Listen up. The convoy rolls in 36 hours. Specialist Ashford has identified a pattern that suggests a coordinated ambush in the valley. She's also identified a fourth cell using advanced communication protocols, which means this isn't local fighters with AKs. This is planned. This is professional. And they're using the call sign of a dead American sniper to coordinate it, which means someone in their chain has studied our people and is sending a message." "What message?" Cole asked. Brennan looked at Kira. She answered, "That they're not afraid of us, that they know who we are, what we've done, and they think they can do it better." The carpenter was the most feared sniper in this theater for 20 years. By using his name, they're saying they've found someone who can match him. "Can they?" Diaz asked. "My father killed 312 enemies across 4 wars. Nobody matched him. But whoever is running this ambush has training, discipline, and patience. He's been planning this for at least 2 months. He knows the terrain, he knows our patterns, and he's positioned himself on the eastern ridge exactly where my father said a good sniper would set up." Patterson leaned forward. "You're saying there's an enemy sniper on that ridge who thinks he's the next Marcus Ashford?" "I'm saying there's an enemy sniper on that ridge who studied my father well enough to steal his name. And if we drive into that valley without addressing him first, he's going to kill a lot of people." The room was silent for 10 full seconds. Then Voss looked at Brennan. "What's the plan, Master Chief?" Brennan stood up. "We adjust the convoy route. We add overwatch elements, and we put a shooter in a position to counter the enemy sniper before he fires his first round." "Patterson," Voss asked. "Ashford," Brennan said. The room erupted. Every man started talking at once. Patterson's face went red. Voss pushed back from the table. Cole stood up. Only Kira stayed still standing at the front of the room with her father's journal in her hands, watching these men argue about whether she was qualified to do the thing she was born to do. Patterson was the loudest. "Master Chief, I have 47 kills. I have 12 years of combat deployments. You cannot put an untested comms specialist in a sniper position on a mission like this." "She's not untested." "Well, she hasn't fired a shot in 7 years. 7 years, Master Chief. I went to the range yesterday. And you missed your 3rd shot at 600 yards. She won't." Patterson's mouth opened and closed. "How do you know that?" Brennan looked at Kira. "Tell him." Kira set the journal on the table. "My father started training me when I was 9. By 12, I was shooting sub-MOA groups at 400 yards. By 14, I was competing in national-level marksmanship events under an alias. I won 3. I placed second twice. My father said the 2 he lost taught me more than the 3 I won, because missing teaches you to feel the shot, not just calculate it." Patterson stared at her. "That was 8 years ago. You were a teenager. Shooting isn't something you forget. It's like breathing. You can hold your breath for a longer time, but your lungs still know what to do. This isn't a competition, specialist. This is combat, real bullets, real bodies. Have you ever killed anyone?" "No." "Then how do you know you can pull the trigger when it matters?" Kira picked up the journal and opened it to a page near the back. She held it up so Patterson could read her father's handwriting. "My daughter has the coldest eyes I've ever seen behind a scope. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't hesitate. She breathes out and the target falls. If she ever has to do this for real, God help whoever's on the other end, because Kira doesn't miss." Patterson read it. He read it again. Then he sat down without another word. Brennan took control. "Here's how this works. Patterson, your primary overwatch on the western ridge. You cover the convoy from elevation. Ashford takes the eastern approach counter-sniper position. She knows the terrain from her father's notes. She knows where the enemy will set up. She's our best chance of neutralizing that shooter before he opens up on our people. And if she freezes, Voss asked quietly, then Patterson takes over and we lose time we can't afford. Brennan looked at Kira. You're not going to freeze, are you, specialist? No, Master Chief. You understand what I'm asking you to do? I'm asking you to break a promise you made to your mother. I'm asking you to pick up a weapon you swore you'd never touch again. I'm asking you to kill people. I understand, but why are you saying yes? Kira looked at the men around the table. She looked at Cole, who had tried to flirt with her and gotten shut down. She looked at Diaz, who had laughed about it. She looked at Patterson, who 5 minutes ago thought she was nothing. She looked at Voss, who still wasn't sure. And she looked at Brennan, who was giving her the same steady gaze her father used to give her before a competition. Because my father didn't train me to hide. He trained me to protect. And if I sit in that comm shack and listen to these men die, when I could have stopped it, I won't be breaking one promise. I'll be breaking all of them. Brennan nodded once. Get her a rifle. What rifle? Patterson asked. Mine, Kira said. Everyone looked at her. My father's rifle, an M24. I've carried it in my footlocker through 3 deployments. It's zeroed to my specifications. It's been maintained and cleaned every 30 days for 7 years. Voss actually laughed. You've been carrying a sniper rifle for 3 deployments and never told anyone. Nobody asked. Brennan shook his head. Get your rifle, Ashford. We prep in 12 hours. The meeting broke up. Men filed out in silence, each of them carrying the weight of what they'd just learned. Kira walked back to her quarters alone, her boots heavy on the gravel, her chest tight with something that felt like grief and adrenaline and destiny all twisted together. She pulled her footlocker from under the bunk. She opened it. Beneath her spare uniforms and personal items, wrapped in the same oilcloth her father had used, was the M24. She lifted it out. The weight was exactly what she remembered. The stock was smooth under her fingers, worn to a perfect fit by her father's hands, then by hers. She held it the way a musician holds an instrument after years away from the stage, with reverence and terror and a longing so deep it hurt. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since the funeral, but her throat closed and her vision blurred, and she held that rifle against her chest and breathed the way her father taught her, slow and steady, letting the air carry the fear out of her body. Then she sat down on her bunk and began checking the weapon. Bolt action, smooth. Scope clear. Barrel clean. Every component was exactly where it should be. Because she had maintained this rifle with the same obsessive precision her father had every month for 7 years, caring for a weapon she swore she'd never fire again. At 1400, Cole found her behind the armory, dry firing into an empty sandbag berm. She didn't hear him approach, which meant she was deep inside her head, deep inside the zone her father called the quiet place. Ashford. She didn't flinch. She finished her trigger pull, held her position for 2 seconds, then lowered the rifle. Cole, I wanted to say something. If it's about the comm shack, I already apologized to the signal repeater. He almost smiled. Almost. It's not about that. I wanted to say that I've been watching you since you got here. The way you move, the way you scan a room, the way you listen to gunfire like other people listen to music. I knew something was different about you. I just couldn't figure out what. And now you know. Now I know you're Marcus Ashford's kid, and you've been hiding a sniper rifle in your footlocker. And tomorrow you're going to be covering my 6 from a ridge I didn't even know was a threat. He paused. Yeah, now I know, no. Does it bother you that you're a better shooter than me? Probably. That you're covering my 6? No, that's the opposite of bothering me. She looked at him for a long moment. Really looked at him, not the dismissive glance she'd given him in the comm shack. He was scared. Not of the mission, of losing people. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his hands stayed loose at his knees, ready for something that hadn't happened yet. Cole, have you ever lost someone on a mission? His face changed. Last deployment. My best friend. Mortar round. What was his name? Jake Riley. Then tomorrow I shoot for Jake Riley too. Cole swallowed hard. He nodded. He turned and walked away, and Kira watched him go. And she felt the weight of what she'd just taken on settle across her shoulders like a cloak made of iron. By 1800, the base was buzzing. Word had spread the way word always spreads, on a small FOB, fast, distorted, and electric. The comms girl was a sniper. The comms girl was Marcus Ashford's daughter. The comms girl had been carrying a rifle this whole time. Every version of the story was slightly different and slightly wrong. And Kira heard them all because people forget that the person who runs the radios can hear everything. At 1900, Patterson knocked on the door of the comms shack. Kira looked up. He was standing there with his own rifle case and a look on his face she hadn't seen before. "You got a minute?" "Depends on what you need." He set the case down. "I need to know something and I need the truth." "Go ahead." "Your father's journal, that entry about you, the one about the cold eyes. Did he write that before or after you beat him?" Kira went still. "What?" "I've read everything about your father. Everything. Every interview, every after-action report, every article. There's a story that Marcus Ashford was once beaten in a private match by an unknown shooter. No name, no record. Just a rumor that someone outshot the carpenter on his own range and he never told anyone who it was." Patterson leaned against the doorframe. "Was it you?" Kira stared at him. "Nobody knew about that." Nobody. It was a Sunday afternoon. She was 15, and her father set up a challenge course on a private range in Virginia. 20 targets, variable distances, wind conditions, time limit. He went first and shot a 98 out of 100. She went second and shot a 99. He stared at the scorecard for a full minute. Then he looked at her and he smiled, the biggest smile she'd ever seen on his face, and he said, "That's my girl." "Yes," she told Patterson. "It was me." Patterson stood there processing. Then he unzipped his rifle case and pulled out a cleaning kit. "Show me how you zero your scope. I want to see the carpenter's method." They sat together for an hour, two snipers in a plywood shack talking about windage and elevation and trigger discipline and breath control. Patterson asked questions he'd never been able to ask Marcus Ashford, and Kira answered them with her father's voice in her head, guiding every word. Somewhere during that hour, the hostility between them dissolved, replaced by something that only exists between people who speak the same rare language. At 2100, Brennan found them still talking. "Patterson, Ashford, get some sleep. Convoy brief is at 0400. Patterson stood up, collected his gear, and turned to Kira. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're on that ridge tomorrow." "Don't be glad yet. Be glad when everyone comes home." He nodded and left. Kira packed up her father's rifle, carried it back to her bunk, and lay down in the dark with the weapon beside her, the same way her father used to sleep in the field, one hand on the stock, ready for whatever came next. She didn't sleep. She lay there and listened to the bass settle into silence, and she thought about her mother sitting in a kitchen in Virginia, not knowing that her daughter had just broken the only promise she'd ever asked for. She thought about calling her. She thought about what she'd say. She thought about the sound her mother would make when she heard the truth, and she decided that some calls are better made after the bullets stop flying. At 0300, she got up. She dressed in the dark. She collected her gear, her rifle, her ammunition, her radio, and the small laminated photo of her father she kept in her breast pocket. She walked to the operations tent, where Brennan was already waiting with a cup of coffee and a map covered in red markings. "You ready?" he asked. "My father used to say, you're never ready. You're just willing." "Smart man." "The smartest I ever knew." Brennan handed her the coffee. She drank it standing up, studying the map one last time, memorizing the positions, the distances, the angles. 36 targets she might have to engage. 12 possible sniper hides on the eastern ridge. 4 confirmed enemy communication nodes. 1 unknown hostile who had stolen her father's name and was waiting in those mountains to kill Americans. At 0400, the full team assembled. 22 soldiers, 12 SEALs, 10 Army, 1 communications specialist carrying a dead legend's rifle and the weight of a broken promise. Torres ran the brief. Brennan ran the specifics. Kira said nothing. She stood in the back and memorized every face in the room because her father always said you should know the faces of the people you are protecting. That way, when the scope gets heavy and the trigger gets hard, you remember why you're pulling it. At 0530, the convoy engine started. At 0545, Kira loaded her rifle chambered around and felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. She felt complete. At 0600, the convoy rolled through the gate of FOB Liberty, and Kira felt every heartbeat in her throat. She was in the back of the last Humvee, wedged between her radio equipment and her father's rifle, watching the base shrink behind them through the rear window. Cole was driving. Diaz was in the passenger seat. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the engine and the crunch of tires on gravel, and the low static hiss of the radio channel that Kira had set to the enemy's fourth cell frequency. They were listening. She knew they were listening, somewhere in those mountains. The man who called himself the Carpenter was watching them leave the wire, counting vehicles, counting heads, calculating the kill. Comms check. Brennan's voice came through the radio from the lead MRAP. All elements sound off. One by one, the vehicles responded. Kira keyed her handset last. Relay 6 comms are green. All frequencies active. No enemy traffic on primary channels. Copy Relay 6. Stay sharp. Stay sharp. Her father used to say that too. But he'd follow it with a grin and add, but not too sharp. Sharp people cut themselves. She could almost hear him laughing. The convoy moved east along the main supply route for 40 minutes without incident. The sun came up hard and fast the way it always did in this part of the world, like someone had flipped a switch. Kira monitored 3 frequencies simultaneously, her ears trained on every pop and crackle of static, waiting for the signal she knew was coming. At 0642, she heard it, a single burst transmission on the 4th cell frequency, 2 seconds long, encrypted. But she recognized the cadence, the same operator she'd been tracking for days. He was close, within 5 kilometers, and he was transmitting to someone even closer. Warhorse Actual, this is Relay 6, she said, keeping her voice level. I have activity on the 4th cell, single burst 2 seconds encrypted. Bearing suggests transmitter is within 5 clicks northeast. Brennan responded immediately. Copy. Can you triangulate? Negative with 1 receiver. I need the relay station active to triangulate. That means I need to be in position. How long until we reach your drop point? 12 minutes. Patterson, you copy. Patterson's voice came from the Western Overwatch vehicle already splitting off from the main convoy. Copy Actual. I'm 15 minutes from my hide. I'll be set before she is. Ashford, the moment you're in position. I want to fix on that transmitter. Understood. 12 minutes. Kira used every one of them. She checked her rifle a final time. She loaded 5 rounds into the internal magazine, each one placed with a precision that was almost surgical. She adjusted her scope settings based on the elevation data from her father's journal. She calculated wind speed from the movement of dust around the vehicle. She did all of this the way she'd done it 1,000 times as a teenager, mechanically, automatically, the way her hands remembered even when her conscious mind tried to resist. Cole glanced at her in the rearview mirror. He watched her load that rifle the way a concert pianist watches another musician warm up with recognition and a quiet kind of awe. You look like you've done that before, he said. Once or twice. Once or twice, right. At 0654, the Humvee stopped at the base of a rocky slope. This was her drop point. Kira grabbed her rifle, her radio pack, and a small bag of supplies. She opened the door. Ashford, Cole said. She paused. Come back! That's the plan. She was out of the vehicle and moving before he could say anything else. She climbed the slope the way her father had taught her, low and fast, using the terrain for cover, placing her feet on rock instead of loose ground to avoid leaving tracks. In 9 minutes, she was in position, tucked behind a natural rock formation that gave her a clear view of the valley floor below and the eastern ridge across the gap. She set up the relay antenna first. Comms was still her primary job, and the convoy needed her signal link to coordinate with base. Within 3 minutes, the relay was active green lights across the board-clean connection back to Phobe Liberty. Then she unpacked the rifle. She laid it across the rock in front of her, settled into a prone position, and pressed her cheek against the stock. The wood was warm from the sun. It smelled like gun oil and something else, something older. Her father. After all these years, the stock still carried a trace of him sweat and aftershave, and the indefinable scent of a man who spent his life in the field. I'm here, Dad, she whispered. She put her eye to the scope and began scanning the eastern ridge. Warhorse Actual Relay 6 is in position. Relay is active. Beginning counter-sniper scan of the eastern ridge. Copy Relay 6, Patterson status. In position Actual. Western ridge is clear. I have eyes on the convoy route. All elements. The convoy enters the valley in 8 minutes. Stay frosty. 8 minutes. Kira swept the ridge systematically, section by section, the way Marcus had drilled into her since childhood. Don't rush, don't skip. Every rock, every shadow, every fold in the terrain. A sniper hides where the eye doesn't want to look in the boring places. The obvious places, the places so plain that your brain skips right over them. 6 minutes, nothing. 5 minutes, nothing. 4 minutes. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. One breath every 4 seconds. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The bullet goes where your breath goes. 3 minutes. She caught something. Not movement, not a glint. A shape. A shape that was almost right but not quite a rock, that was slightly too round, slightly too smooth, slightly too perfect. She adjusted her scope. Magnification up. Focus tight. It was a ghillie hood. Someone had covered themselves in local vegetation and rock-colored fabric and positioned themselves behind a low wall of stacked stones on the eastern ridge. They were good. They were very good. A lesser observer would have missed them entirely. But Kira wasn't a lesser observer. She was the carpenter's daughter. Warhorse Actual Relay 6. I have a possible hostile Eastern Ridge grid reference. Echo 794261. Single individual in a concealed sniper position. He's dug in. He's been here a while. Brennan's voice came back tight and controlled. Can you confirm weapon? Kira adjusted her scope again. She could see the tip of a barrel protruding 2 inches from under the ghillie cover. Long barrel, bolt action, a real sniper rifle, not an AK or an RPG. Confirmed, bolt action rifle. He's set up for long-range precision fire on the valley floor. He has a direct line to the convoy road. Patterson, can you see him? Patterson's voice was strained. Negative actual. He's on the opposite ridge from me. I don't have an angle. Ashford's the only one with a shot. Ashford ranged to target, Kira calculated. She didn't need a rangefinder. Her father had taught her to estimate distance using reference points, terrain features, and the size of known objects in the scope. It was an old skill, a sniper's skill, the kind of thing they don't teach in communication school. 640 yards. Wind, crosswind, left to right. 8 miles per hour. Gusting to 12. Can you make that shot? She closed her eyes. 640 yards. Crosswind, a target she could barely see. A rifle she hadn't fired in 7 years. And 22 lives, depending on her answer. Yes. Rules of engagement require hostile action or confirmed hostile intent. He hasn't fired yet. He will the moment the convoy enters his kill zone. That's 3 minutes from now. I know the math, Ashford. I need him to show intent. Master Chief, if he shows intent, someone in that convoy dies. That's how snipers work. You don't see intent until you see the bullet. Silence on the radio. She could feel Brennan wrestling with the rules, the regulations, the lawyers, and politicians who wrote engagement protocols from offices 10,000 miles from the killing ground. Hold your position. Do not fire until I give the order. Copy. Her finger rested beside the trigger guard. Not on it, beside it, waiting. At 0702, the lead MRAP entered the valley. Kira watched through her scope as the convoy rolled forward, painfully slow, painfully exposed. She split her attention between the enemy, sniper on the ridge, and the vehicles below. Her radio crackled with routine check-ins from the convoy elements. Normal voices, calm voices, men who didn't know that a killer was watching them through crosshairs at that exact moment. At 0704, the enemy sniper moved. It was subtle, a shift of weight, an adjustment of the rifle barrel. He was tracking the lead vehicle, following it through his scope, matching its speed with a slow, patient rotation. He was getting ready. Warhorse Actual, he's tracking the lead vehicle. He's preparing to fire. Hold. Master Chief, he is going to shoot. Hold, Ashford. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to pull the trigger. Every lesson her father ever taught her was pointing at this moment, this second, this breath. But the order was hold, and she was a soldier, and soldiers follow orders, even when the order is wrong. At 07:05 and 30 seconds, the enemy sniper's barrel stopped moving. He had his target. Kira could see his shoulder tighten as he pressed into the stock. She could see his breathing change, slowing down the same way hers did before a shot. He was in the quiet place. He was ready. He's about to fire, she said, and her voice broke for the first time. Warhorse Actual, this is Relay 6, requesting weapons free. He is going to kill someone in the next 5 seconds. 2 seconds of silence that lasted a lifetime. Weapons free. Kira exhaled. The crosshairs settled on the enemy sniper's upper body. She couldn't see his face. She didn't need to. She saw the shape of him, the silhouette of a man about to take a life. And she placed the reticle exactly where her father had taught her, center mass just below the line, where his neck met his shoulders. She squeezed the trigger. The M24 bucked against her shoulder like an old friend shaking her hand. The round crossed 640 yards in less than a second. The enemy sniper's body jerked once hard and then went still. "Target down," she said. Her voice was flat, empty, like the words had come from somewhere outside her body. "Confirm kill," Brennan said. She looked through the scope. The man wasn't moving. The rifle had fallen from his hands. A dark stain was spreading across the rocks beneath him. "Confirmed. Target is neutralized." Good. Brennan never finished the word, because at that exact moment, the valley exploded. Not one shooter, not two. The entire eastern ridge lit up with muzzle flashes. RPGs streaked down toward the convoy. Automatic weapons fire poured from positions that hadn't been on any intelligence report, any scan, any analysis. The enemy sniper on the ridge wasn't alone. He was the spotter. He was the signal. When he died, the rest of them opened up, either triggered by his death or on a timer that coincided with it. "Contact, contact, all elements. We are under fire." The radio erupted with voices, screaming, gunfire, explosions. The lead MRAP took an RPG on the front quarter and slewed sideways, blocking the road. The second vehicle slammed into it. The supply truck braked hard and the driver's side window shattered inward as bullets raked across the cab. Kira's world narrowed to the scope in front of her. She worked the bolt. The spent casing flew. A new round chambered. She found the nearest muzzle flash on the ridge, a fighter standing behind a rock with an RPG on his shoulder aiming at the stalled convoy below. Breathe out. Squeeze. The fighter dropped backward, the RPG tumbling from his hands and clattering down the slope unfired. "Target 2 down," she said into the radio, but nobody was listening. The channel was chaos. She worked the bolt again. Found the next threat, a machine gunner pouring fire into the convoy from behind a low wall 200 yards from the first kill. She adjusted for distance, adjusted for wind, which had shifted. Her father's voice was in her head, calm, steady, guiding her the way he had when she was 12 years old, and the target was a paper silhouette instead of a human being. "Lead the wind, baby girl. Let the bullet find its own way home." She fired. The machine gunner's head snapped to the side and he collapsed over his weapon. 30 seconds had passed since her first shot. 3 men were dead, and the ambush was still raging. "Relay 6, this is Warhorse, actual. Where are they? I need positions." Kira did something that no one expected. She did both jobs at the same time. She keyed her radio with her left hand while keeping her right hand on the rifle scanning through the scope, and she began calling out enemy positions with the precision of a trained forward observer. "Eastern Ridge, 200 meters north of my first target, 4 fighters with automatic weapons behind a rock line. 300 meters north RPG team, 2 men. 450 meters, second sniper position. Single shooter elevated, partially concealed. Patterson, can you engage? I have the 4-man position. Engaging." Patterson's rifle cracked from the western ridge. One of the 4 fighters fell, then another. The other 2 scrambled for cover. Kira was already on the second sniper, 450 yards, elevated. Wind had shifted again, now gusting from the right. She adjusted 2 clicks on her scope. She controlled her breathing. The enemy sniper was firing at the convoy, working his bolt with the smooth rhythm of someone who had done this many times before. She put the crosshair on his chest and fired. The round hit him in the shoulder. He spun, fell sideways, and his rifle clattered away. Not a kill, a wound. He was still moving, crawling toward his weapon. Kira worked the bolt faster than she ever had. Chambered, aimed, fired. He stopped moving. 4. Relay 6, this is Cole. We're pinned at the second vehicle. We have 2 wounded. I need that RPG team taken out now. Kira swung the rifle north. The RPG team was 300 meters away, loading a second round. 1 man held the launcher while the other fed the rocket into the tube. They were working fast, practiced, efficient. In 4 seconds, they would fire, and the rocket would hit the vehicle where Cole and Diaz were trapped. She didn't have 4 seconds of calculation. She had 2 seconds of instinct. She fired at the man holding the launcher. He dropped. The launcher fell. The second man grabbed for it. She worked the bolt chambered and fired again. The second man crumpled beside the first. 5 and 6, she said. RPG team neutralized. Cole, you're clear on the north side. Copy. Thank you, Relay 6. 6 men dead in 4 minutes, and Kira Ashford's hands were still steady. But the ambush wasn't over. More fighters were pouring onto the ridge from concealed positions, further back positions that hadn't fired in the initial volley. Reserves held back for exactly this moment. The enemy commander, whoever he was, had planned for the possibility that his front line would fall. He had depth. He had numbers. Warhorse Actual, I count at least 8 additional fighters moving onto the ridge from the northeast. They're reinforcing. This ambush has a second wave. Brennan's voice was strained but controlled. Can you engage? I can engage as long as I have ammunition. I have 14 rounds remaining. Make them count. Kira settled into the rifle. She felt the stock against her cheek. She felt the trigger under her finger. She felt her father's presence beside her. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as something deeper. The DNA in her blood, the muscle memory in her hands, the inherited instinct that turned a girl from Virginia into the deadliest person on this battlefield. She fired. 7. She worked the bolt. 8. The 8th target had been running between positions, a moving target at 500 yards. She led him by 2 body widths, exhaled and squeezed. He fell mid-stride, crashing face first into the rocks. How is she doing this? Diaz's voice crackled on the radio, raw with disbelief. How is she doing this? Nobody answered him. Nobody had an answer. At 07:19:13 minutes into the ambush, Kira had fired 12 rounds and dropped 9 targets. She had missed once on a fighter who ducked behind cover a fraction of a second before her bullet arrived. She adjusted and took him when he reappeared 4 seconds later. That was target 9. Patterson had taken 3 from the western ridge. The convoy gunners had suppressed 2 more positions. But the fight was still raging, and Kira could see through her scope that the remaining fighters were repositioning, consolidating, getting ready for a final push. Then she saw him, a man on the ridge, 600 yards out, moving with a calm deliberation that separated him from every other fighter on that mountain. He wasn't running, he wasn't scrambling, he was walking. And he was carrying a rifle with a scope, a long rifle, a sniper's rifle, and he was moving directly toward the position where the first sniper had been killed. He stopped. He looked down at the dead man. Then he looked up directly at Kira's position, and even at 600 yards, through 2 scopes pointed at each other across a valley of smoke and blood, she felt his eyes lock onto hers. He knew where she was. He'd been watching. He'd been waiting. Warhorse Actual, Kira said, and for the first time her voice was barely above a whisper. There's a second sniper. He just arrived on the ridge. He's looking right at me. Brennan's response was immediate. Take the shot. He's moving into cover. I don't have a clean angle. Patterson, I can't see him. He's on Ashford's side of the ridge. The second sniper disappeared behind the rock wall. Kira tracked the position with her scope, waiting for him to reappear. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her trigger finger. She willed it to slow down. She controlled her breathing. She became still the way her father became still, a piece of the landscape, a rock with eyes and a rifle, and the patience to wait forever. 10 seconds. 20. 30. At 41 seconds, the barrel of his rifle appeared around the edge of the rock, then his shoulder, then the side of his face. He was aiming at the convoy. Kira put her crosshair on the exposed sliver of his head and made a calculation that would have taken most snipers a full minute. Wind, distance, elevation, ankle of exposure. Target size, maybe 4 inches of skull visible above the rock. 600 yards, crosswind gusting. A shot that 99% of trained snipers would call impossible. But she wasn't 99% of snipers. She was Marcus Ashford's daughter. She fired. The round traveled for less than a second. It hit the second sniper exactly where she'd aimed, and he fell behind the rock wall and did not reappear. 10, she said. The radio went silent. Not the silence of communication failure. The silence of 22 people who had just witnessed something they couldn't explain. Then Brennan's voice, quiet and steady. All elements cease fire. I say again, cease fire. The ridge is clear. Kira lifted her face from the scope. She looked at the valley below. The convoy was battered but intact. Smoke rose from the lead MRAP. IAP men were moving between vehicles, treating wounded, securing positions. She could see Cole pulling a soldier from the second Humvee. She could see Diaz setting up a security perimeter. She looked at her rifle. She looked at her hands. They were shaking now, not during the fight, after. The way her father said it always happened. The body waits until the danger passes, and then it lets you feel everything you suppressed. She reached into her breast pocket and pulled out the laminated photo of her father. She held it in her trembling fingers and looked at his face, the strong jaw, the steady eyes, the hint of a smile that never quite fully formed. 10 for 10, Dad, she whispered. I didn't miss. She pressed the photo against her chest, closed her eyes, and let the tears come for the first time in 7 years. The tears lasted 43 seconds. Kira counted them the way her father counted everything, precisely because precision was control and control was survival. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand, packed her emotion into the same locked compartment where she'd kept it for 7 years, and picked up her radio. Warhorse Actual Relay 6. Ridge is clear from my position. I count 10 enemy KYA on the eastern slope. Request permission to maintain overwatch while convoy conducts recovery operations. Brennan's voice came back steady, but there was something underneath it now. Something that hadn't been there before the first shot. Respect didn't cover it. It was closer to reverence. Copy Relay 6. Maintain position. Medevac is inbound 8 minutes. Good work, Ashford. Good work. 2 words. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to scream. She wanted to call her mother and say, I'm sorry, and I'm alive, and I just killed 10 men, and I don't know if that makes me a hero or a monster. Instead, she settled back behind her rifle and watched the convoy through her scope, protecting them the way her father had protected his people for 24 years, silently from a distance with nothing between her and the enemy but glass and patience. At 0741, the medevac helicopter touched down. 3 wounded soldiers were loaded aboard. None dead. Not a single American killed. The RPG that would have hit Cole's vehicle never launched because Kira put 2 rounds into the team before they could fire. The sniper round that would have killed the MRAP driver never left the barrel because Kira dropped the shooter before he could squeeze. 10 men on a ridge with a plan to slaughter an American convoy, and a 23-year-old woman with a dead man's rifle had stopped every one of them. At 0815, Brennan called her down from the ridge. She climbed down the same way she'd climbed up, low and careful, her rifle slung across her back, the weight of it different now. Heavier, not physically, something else. The weight of what she'd done with it, the lives she'd taken, the lives she'd saved. That weight would never come off. Her father had carried it for 24 years. Now it was hers. Cole was waiting at the bottom of the slope. He was covered in dust and someone else's blood. There was a cut above his left eye that he hadn't bothered to treat. He looked at her the way people look at things that they don't fully understand, with wide eyes and a slightly open mouth, and the expression of someone whose entire framework for reality has just been rearranged. 10 targets, he said. Yes. In 18 minutes. 17 minutes and 41 seconds. But who's counting? He stared at her. Then he did something she didn't expect. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, pulled her into a hug so tight she could feel his heart hammering against her chest through both their body armor. He held her for 5 seconds, and she let him because she needed it more than she would ever admit. Jake Riley says thank you, he whispered. She squeezed his arm once. He let go. Neither of them spoke about it again. The convoy limped back to FOB Liberty at 0930. The lead MRAP had to be towed. The supply truck had 47 bullet holes in it, but was still running because the engine block had held. Every soldier who rolled out that gate at 0600 rolled back through it alive. Battered, shaken, bleeding, but alive. Kira walked through the gate last. She was carrying her rifle in her right hand and her radio pack in her left, and she was walking the way she always walked, head down, quiet, invisible. Except she wasn't invisible anymore. Every person on that base was watching her. Every eye tracked her from the gate to the operations tent, and the silence that followed her was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. Brennan was waiting inside the operations tent. So was Voss. So was Torres. So was Patterson. They were standing around the map table with expressions that ranged from stunned to something that looked almost like fear. "Sit down, Ashford," Brennan said. She sat. She placed the rifle across her knees. She noticed her hands were steady again. The shaking had stopped somewhere on the ride back, replaced by a numbness that spread from her fingertips to her elbows like Novocaine. "Walk us through it," Torres said. "Every shot." She walked them through it. Every shot, every calculation, every adjustment. She described the wind changes, the distance, corrections, the split-second decisions. She spoke in the flat, clinical language of a technical debrief, stripping the emotion out of it, the way you strip copper wire, pulling away the insulation to expose the raw metal underneath. When she finished, the room was silent for a long time. Patterson broke it. "Shot number 10, the second sniper, 4 inches of exposed target at 600 yards in a gusting crosswind. I want you to tell me how you made that shot." "I didn't calculate it." "What do you mean you didn't calculate it?" "I mean there wasn't time for a full calculation. I had less than 2 seconds of exposure. So I felt it." Patterson leaned forward. "You felt it." "My father called it ghost shooting. When you fired enough rounds, when the rifle is part of your body, you stop calculating and start knowing. The bullet goes where your breath goes. I breathed out, and the bullet went where it needed to go." Patterson sat back in his chair. He looked at Brennan, he looked at Voss, then he looked back at Kira. "I've been a sniper for 12 years. I have never once made a shot like that. Not on the range, not in combat, not ever. And you made it after 7 years of not firing a weapon. Some things you don't forget. That's not memory, Ashford. That's something else." Brennan stood up. "All right, debrief is over. Ashford, you need to eat, hydrate, and get checked by medical. Torres, I want the after-action report on my desk by 1600. Patterson, start working up the enemy sniper positions for intelligence. I want to know who these people were and who trained them." "Master Chief," Kira said. "What?" "The second sniper. The one who walked onto the ridge after I killed the first one. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't rushing. He walked to the body, looked down at it, and then looked directly at my position. He knew exactly where I was." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he wasn't reinforcement. He was the real shooter. The first sniper was the decoy. The man I killed last was the one running the operation. He was the one who called himself the carpenter." The room went cold. Brennan's jaw tightened. "How do you know?" "Because of the way he moved. He wasn't a fighter. He was a craftsman. My father described men like that in his journal. The ones who treat killing the way a surgeon treats surgery, methodical, patient, precise. That man came onto the ridge, knowing his team was being destroyed, and he didn't run. He set up his rifle and tried to finish the mission. That's not a soldier. That's a sniper." Voss spoke for the first time. "And you killed him?" "Yes. With a 4-inch target window at 600 yards. "Yes." Voss looked at Brennan. "Master Chief, I've been in this business for 16 years. I've worked with the best shooters in the world. Delta, DevGru, the best. And I'm telling you right now, what she did on that ridge today is the single most impressive display of marksmanship I have ever witnessed or heard of. And she did it as a communications specialist who hasn't fired a rifle in 7 years." "She's not a communications specialist," Brennan said quietly. "She never was." Kira looked up at him. There was no argument in her eyes, no denial. He was right, and they both knew it. At 1100 word reached the base commander. Colonel Hargrove, a career infantry officer with 2 stars on his horizon and a political instinct sharper than his tactical one, summoned Kira to his office. She walked in still wearing her dusty fatigues, still carrying the numbness in her hands, still smelling like gunpowder and sweat. Hargrove was sitting behind a desk that was too clean for a combat zone. He had a file open in front of him, her file, and next to it another file older, thicker, with a name on the tab that made Kira's stomach clench. Marcus Ashford. "Sit down, specialist." She sat. "I've been reading about your father. Remarkable career, remarkable man." "Yes, sir. And now I'm reading about you. 10 confirmed kills in 18 minutes during a convoy ambush. Counter-sniper operations. Forward observation. Communications relay. All performed simultaneously by a single E4 communications specialist." "Yes, sir." Hargrove closed both files. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at her with the kind of measured evaluation that senior officers use when they're deciding whether someone is an asset or a liability. Here's my problem. Specialist. You are not qualified, trained, or authorized to serve in a sniper capacity. You are a communications specialist. You were assigned to a relay position, not a combat firing position. What you did today, regardless of the outcome, represents a significant deviation from your assigned duties and your authorized role. Sir, I was given weapons free by Master Chief Brennan under rules of engagement. The convoy was under imminent threat. I responded to that threat with the skills available to me. Skills that are not in your military record. Skills that nobody in your chain of command knew you possessed. Skills that you deliberately concealed for the duration of your service. Kira felt the heat rise in her chest. I didn't conceal anything, sir. I'm a communications specialist. That's what I was trained to do by the United States Army. What I learned before I enlisted is my personal history. Your personal history just killed 10 enemy combatants. My personal history just saved 22 American lives. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to being challenged by specialists. He wasn't used to being wrong either, but he was wrong, and Kira could see that he knew it. The problem wasn't what she'd done. The problem was that what she'd done made his intelligence section look incompetent, his planning look inadequate, and his command look unprepared. She'd exposed every failure in the system by succeeding outside of it. I'm opening an investigation, he said, into the circumstances of your weapons deployment, your concealment of relevant skills and equipment, and your deviation from assigned duties. Understood, sir. You are restricted to base pending the outcome. You will surrender the M24 rifle to the armory. Something broke inside her mind, not loudly, not dramatically. A small, quiet fracture like a hairline crack in glass. Surrender the rifle. Her father's rifle. The last physical piece of him she had. The weapon that had just saved 22 lives and proven that Marcus Ashford's legacy was alive and breathing and sitting in a folding chair in a colonel's office in Afghanistan. Sir, that rifle is personal property. It is not military-issued equipment. It was used in a military operation. It is now evidence in an investigation. Evidence of what, sir? Evidence that I saved an entire convoy. Hargrove's face hardened. You are dismissed, specialist. Kira stood. She walked to the door. She stopped. Sir, one more thing. What? While you're investigating me, you might want to investigate how the enemy knew our convoy route, timing, and composition. Because someone on this base is feeding them information. I identified the communication pattern 3 days ago and reported it to Master Chief Brennan. That's how I knew the ambush was coming. And whoever the leak is, they're still here. She walked out before he could respond. She heard him pick up his phone before the door closed behind her. By 1200, the investigation was already becoming something bigger than Hargrove intended. Because Brennan, who had 17 years of combat and zero patience for politics, walked into Hargrove's office 30 minutes after Kira left and shut the door behind him. Nobody heard what was said, but Voss, who was waiting outside, said Brennan's voice carried through the plywood walls for 11 minutes straight, and when the Master Chief came out, his face was the color of a brick, and Hargrove's aide was on the phone with brigade headquarters. At 1300, Patterson went to this armory where Kira's rifle had been surrendered. He didn't take it. He couldn't. But he stood there and looked at it behind the cage wire, and the armory sergeant said Patterson's hands were shaking. That rifle killed more enemies this morning than our entire sniper section has killed in 3 months, Patterson told the armory sergeant, and they locked it up like it's contraband. At 1400, Cole organized something that nobody authorized. He gathered every soldier who had been in the convoy that morning, all 22 of them, and he walked them to the operations tent where Kira was sitting alone, writing her after-action statement. They filed in one by one. They stood in a semicircle around her, and Cole, whose best friend had died on his last deployment, who had barely survived this morning because a woman he'd dismissed as a secretary had killed 2 men, about to fire an RPG at his vehicle, said the only thing that mattered. We're alive because of you, every single one of us. Whatever happens next, whatever they do to you, whatever they decide, that fact doesn't change. We went into that valley and we all came back, and the only reason we came back is you. Kira looked at their faces, dusty, bruised, some bandaged, all standing, all breathing. I just did my job, she said. No, said a private named Gutierrez, who had been in the supply truck and taken shrapnel in his arm. You did your father's job, and you did it better than anyone I've ever seen. They left one by one. Each of them stopped in front of her. Some shook her hand. Some just nodded. One, a sergeant named Brooks, who had a wife and 3 kids in Georgia, knelt beside her chair and said, "My children still have a father because of you. I will never forget that. Never." Kira held herself together until the last man left. Then she put her head on the table and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the same place the shooting had come from, the deepest part of her. The part where her father lived, the part she tried to bury, the part that refused to stay dead. At 15:30, Brennan found her. She was sitting behind the comm shack, her back against the plywood wall, her knees drawn up, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her without asking permission. "Hargrove's investigation is being reviewed by Brigade," he said. "I made some calls. People above his pay grade are very interested in what happened today, and not in the way he wants them to be. He wants to punish me. He wants to cover himself. There's a difference, but the result is the same if nobody pushes back. And you pushed back. I pushed back so hard I might need a new career." He paused. "Listen to me, Ashford. What you did today doesn't happen. Not like that. Not 10 for 10 in 18 minutes from a cold rifle after 7 years off the trigger. I've been in special operations for 17 years. I've seen the best. I've trained with the best. I've buried the best. And I have never in my entire career seen anyone shoot like you shot today. My father could have done it. Your father would have been proud that you did it, but he also would have told you what I'm about to tell you. What? That the shooting was the easy part. The hard part is what comes after. The faces, the weight, the knowing that you ended 10 lives and you'll carry those lives inside you for the rest of yours. Your father carried 312. It nearly destroyed him. I read that in his file. The drinking, the nightmares, the months where he couldn't look at your mother without seeing the things he'd seen through his scope." Kira's breath caught. "How do you know about that?" "Because I pulled his full service record this morning. Before the convoy, I wanted to know who you came from. And I found a man who was brilliant and broken and trying to be a good father while carrying the worst burden any soldier can carry. He did it for 24 years, Kira, and it killed him just as surely as that bomb did. The bomb just finished what the war started." Nobody had ever said that to her before. Nobody had ever acknowledged the truth that her family had danced around for 7 years. The truth that Marcus Ashford didn't just die in Fallujah. He died every day for 24 years, 1 kill at a time, and the IED was just the period at the end of a very long sentence. "I know," she whispered, "so the question isn't whether you can do what your father did. You proved that today. The question is whether you can survive what your father survived, and that's a question only you can answer." They sat in silence for a long time. The base moved around them. Helicopters came and went. Soldiers walked past without stopping, giving them space the way people do when they sense something private happening. At 1600, Brennan's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 2 minutes, said "understood" twice, and hung up. "Brigade commander wants a video conference in 30 minutes. You, me, Hargrove, and a colonel from JSOC who flew in from Bagram this morning specifically because of what happened today. JSOC Joint Special Operations Command is involved. When a communications specialist drops 10 targets in 18 minutes using a personal weapon that belonged to the most legendary sniper in modern military history, JSOC gets involved. They've been looking for shooters like you for a long time, Ashford. A very long time. I'm not a JSOC operator. I'm an E4 with a radio and a broken promise. You were an E4 with a radio this morning. What you are now is something else entirely. And the people on that video call are going to tell you exactly what that something else is." Brennan stood up and offered her his hand. She took it. He pulled her to her feet, and for a moment they stood face to face, the Master Chief and the specialist, the veteran and the newcomer, the man who recognized what she was and the woman who was only beginning to understand it herself. "Whatever happens in that room," he said, "remember one thing. What? Your father's proudest moment wasn't his 312 kills. It wasn't his commendations or his medals or his legend. His proudest moment was the day you outshot him on that range in Virginia. He wrote about it in his journal. He called it the happiest day of his life." Kira closed her eyes. She saw the range. She saw the scorecard. She saw her father's face, the biggest smile she'd ever seen, and she heard his voice clear as the Afghan sky above her. That's my girl. She opened her eyes. She straightened her uniform. She picked up the only weapon she had left, her training, her blood, her father's name, and she walked toward the operations tent where the men who would decide her future were waiting. Behind her, Brennan watched her go, and for the first time in 17 years of war, he felt something he thought combat had beaten out of him. Hope. The video screen flickered to life, and Kira found herself looking at four faces. Colonel Hargrove sat to her left, rigid, his jaw locked. Brennan sat to her right, arms crossed, radiating the kind of quiet fury that made junior officers avoid hallways. On the screen, two men appeared. The first was Brigadier General Haynes' brigade commander, gray-haired and deliberate. The second was a man who didn't introduce himself by name. He wore no rank insignia, his uniform was clean but unmarked, and his eyes had the flat, assessing quality of someone who spent his career in rooms that didn't officially exist to him. Specialist Ashford, General Haynes began. I've read the after-action report. I've reviewed Master Chief Brennan's assessment. I've spoken with Colonel Hargrove. And I've just finished reading your father's service record for the third time today. Before we proceed, I want to hear it from you. In your own words, why did you conceal your background? Kira sat straight. Her hands rested on her knees, steady. I didn't conceal it, sir. I chose not to volunteer it. My mother asked me to never pick up a rifle again after my father was killed. I honored that promise for 7 years. My enlistment as a communications specialist was legitimate. My training was legitimate. My service record is clean. I didn't lie on any form. I didn't falsify any document. I simply didn't mention that my father taught me to shoot before he taught me to ride a bike. The unnamed man spoke for the first time. His voice was low, precise, the voice of someone who chose every word, the way a sniper chose every shot. Specialist, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Did you bring your father's rifle on deployment with the intention of using it? No, sir. Then why bring it? Kira paused. She felt the answer forming in her chest, rising through her throat, and she let it come because the truth was the only weapon she had left. Because it's the last piece of my father I have. His clothes are gone. His medals are in a box in my mother's attic. His friends stopped visiting after the first year. But his rifle is still here. It still smells like him. It still fits my hands the way it fit was his. I carried it because leaving it behind felt like leaving him behind, and I've already lost him once. I wasn't going to lose him again. The unnamed man studied her. He didn't blink. He didn't nod. He processed. General Haynes spoke. Colonel Hargrove has recommended an Article 15 investigation for unauthorized weapons deployment, concealment of material qualifications, and deviation from assigned duties. Colonel, do you want to present your position? Hargrove leaned forward. Sir, the facts are clear. Specialist Ashford operated outside her authorized role, used a personal weapon in a combat engagement without prior approval, and withheld information about her capabilities that would have materially affected mission planning. Regardless of the outcome, the precedent is dangerous. If every soldier can decide unilaterally to assume a combat role they're not assigned to, we lose command discipline. Master Chief Brennan, Haynes said, your response. Brennan unfolded his arms. Sir, I authorize Specialist Ashford's weapons employment under rules of engagement. I made that decision based on her intelligence analysis, which identified a threat that our organic intelligence section missed for 3 weeks. I placed her in a counter-sniper role because she was the most qualified person available for that position, and I would make the same decision again tomorrow. The convoy is alive because of that decision. If Colonel Hargrove wants to investigate someone for deviating from protocol, he can start with me. Hargrove's face reddened. Master Chief, you don't have the authority to reassign Army personnel to SEAL combat positions. I had the authority to save 22 lives, Colonel, and I used it. The unnamed man raised one hand. Both of them stopped talking immediately, which told Kira everything she needed to know about who held the real power in this conversation. Specialist Ashford, I'm going to tell you something that isn't in any report. The sniper you killed, last the one who walked onto the ridge, we've been tracking him for 14 months. His name was Fareed Kasser, former Iraqi Republican Guard trained by the Soviets in the 1980s and responsible for the deaths of 11 coalition soldiers across 3 provinces. He was a ghost. We couldn't find him. We couldn't fix him. We had JSOC teams dedicated to hunting him, and he slipped every one of them. You killed him with one shot at 600 yards through a 4-inch window in a gusting crosswind after 7 years without firing a weapon. The room went silent. Kira felt the blood drain from her face. 11 soldiers, she said. 11, including 2 snipers from the 75th Ranger Regiment, your father's regiment. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her father's regiment. The man she killed had been hunting men from her father's unit. The man who stole her father's call sign had been killing her father's brothers. And she had ended him with her father's rifle on the terrain her father had mapped, using the skills her father had given her. The coincidence was so precise, so surgical, that it didn't feel like coincidence at all. It felt like something else, something that Kira didn't have a word for and wasn't sure she believed in, but felt in her bones the way she felt a shot before she took it. General Haynes, the unnamed man said, I'm recommending that all disciplinary proceedings against Specialist Ashford be dropped immediately. Furthermore, I'm requesting her transfer to a JSOC assessment program effective within 72 hours. The specifics will be handled through my office. Hargrove opened his mouth. Sir, with all due respect, Colonel, your convoy survived because this woman did something extraordinary. Your investigation is noted. It is also concluded. Do we understand each other? Hargrove closed his mouth. He nodded once. He did not look at Kira. The screen went dark. Haynes and the unnamed man disappeared. The room was quiet. Hargrove stood up, collected his papers, and walked out without a word. The door closed behind him, and Brennan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. JSOC, Kira said. JSOC. They want me to be a sniper. They want you to be what you already are, Kira. They just want to make it official. She stared at the blank screen. Her reflection stared back. A dusty woman in wrinkled fatigues with her father's eyes and her mother's dream and a decision sitting in front of her that would define the rest of her life. I need to make a phone call first, she said. Brennan nodded. He stood up. He walked to the door. Then he stopped the way he always stopped because Donovan Brennan never left a room without saying the thing that needed to be said. Your father would want you to call her. He'd also want you to go. He left. Kira sat alone in the empty room for 7 minutes. Then she walked to the communications shack, sat down at her station for the last time, and dialed a number in Virginia. It rang 3 times. Her mother answered the way she always answered, with Kira's name, because caller ID showed the overseas prefix, and only one person called her from that prefix. Kira. Hi, Mom. Are you okay? You sound different. I'm okay. I'm safe. Everyone is safe. What happened? Kira closed her eyes. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. She opened her mouth and the words came out in a rush the way water comes through a crack in a dam, unstoppable once it starts. I broke my promise, Mom. I picked up Dad's rifle today. There was an ambush and people were going to die, and I picked it up and I used it and I saved them. All of them. 22 people. I saved them because Dad taught me how, and I'm sorry. And I know you asked me not to, and I know I promised, and I'm sorry. Silence on the line. Long, terrible silence. Kira could hear her mother breathing. She could hear the clock on the kitchen wall, the same clock that had been there when Marcus cleaned his rifles at the table, the same clock that had been ticking when the notification team knocked on the door. How many, her mother asked. How many what? How many people did you save? 22. Another pause. When her mother spoke again, her voice was different. Not angry, not broken. Something else. Something Kira had never heard from her before. Your father called me the night before his last deployment. Did you know that? No, he called me at 2 a.m. He couldn't sleep. He told me that he'd been watching you shoot for years and that you were better than him, and that it scared him because he knew what that meant. He knew that someday, somewhere, you would have to choose between the promise you made to me and the gift he gave you. And he told me something I've never told you because I was too angry and too scared and too selfish to say it. What did he say? He said, when that day comes, don't be angry at her. Be proud because our daughter doesn't miss, and every person she saves is a person who goes home to their family the way I should have gone home to mine. Kira's chest collapsed. The sob that came out of her wasn't sound. It was 7 years of silence breaking apart all at once. 7 years of held breath. 7 years of a locked door finally smashing open. She cried into the phone, and her mother cried with her 3,000 miles apart, connected by a dead man's words and a living woman's courage. "I'm proud of you, baby," her mother said through tears. "I'm so proud of you. I'm sorry I broke the promise. You didn't break it. You kept the one that mattered more." They talked for 20 more minutes. Kira told her about the JSOC offer. Her mother went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your father always said the hardest decision is the one you make knowing you can't take it back. Do you want this?" "I think I've always wanted this. I think I've been running from it since I was 16. "Then stop running, Kira. Stop running." She hung up the phone. She sat in the comms shack for a few minutes alone, with the static and the blinking lights and the ghost of the girl she used to be, the girl who hid in radios and frequencies and the safe side of the wire. That girl was gone. She died on a ridge in Afghanistan, and something harder and truer had taken her place. At 1800, she walked to the SEAL compound for the last time. Brennan had called a team meeting, and Kira had been invited, which was itself a statement that nobody missed. SEALs don't invite outsiders to team meetings. Ever. She walked in, and every man in the room stood up. Not at attention. Not formally. They just stood the way you stand when someone walks in who has earned the right to be looked at eye to eye. Cole was there. Diaz, Voss, Patterson. 12 operators who had spent their careers being the best, and they were standing for a 23-year-old communications specialist who had outperformed all of them on the worst day any of them had seen in years. Brennan stood at the front. He waited until the room settled. "Most of you know why we're here. Some of you still can't believe it. I've been doing this for 17 years, and I'm having trouble believing it myself, but here's what I know. 48 hours ago, Specialist Kira Ashford identified a threat that our intelligence missed. She analyzed enemy communications, built a threat assessment, predicted an ambush, and then volunteered to put herself in a position where she would be the primary target. She did all of this while keeping a secret that she'd carried for 7 years, a secret that most of us would have used as a badge of honor from day one. She's Marcus Ashford's daughter. She's a trained sniper who could outshoot every person in this room, and she never said a word." He paused. He looked at Kira. "This morning she broke a promise to her mother, picked up a dead hero's rifle, and killed 10 enemy combatants in 17 minutes and 41 seconds. She neutralized a high-value target that JSOC has been hunting for 14 months. She saved every life in that convoy. And when it was over, she packed up her gear, walked back to base, and sat down at her radio like nothing happened. Because that's who she is. Quiet, professional, lethal. Exactly like her father." Patterson stepped forward. He was holding something. A small wooden box, roughly made the kind of things soldiers build in their downtime with scraps and tools borrowed from the maintenance shop. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a piece of black cloth, was a single spent brass casing. "This is the casing from your 10th round," Patterson said. "The shot that killed Kasser. I went up to the ridge after the engagement and recovered it. I thought you should have it." He held out the box to him. Kira took it. The brass was still slightly discolored from the heat of firing. She held it in her palm and felt its weight impossibly small for something that had ended a 14-month manhunt and changed her life forever. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it for more than the casing. Diaz spoke next. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry I laughed when Cole said you shut him down. Turns out you shut down a lot more than Cole." The room laughed, Cole included. Even Kira smiled, the first real smile she'd given anyone on this base since she arrived. Voss, who had doubted her from the first briefing, walked up to her and extended his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, and when he spoke, his voice was rough, with something that might have been emotion, though Tommy Voss would have denied it to his grave. "You earned your place in this room, Ashford. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise." One by one they came to her. 12 SEALs. 12 handshakes. 12 men who had been trained to be the best in the world, acknowledging that the best among them that day had been a woman they'd overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. Cole was last. He stood in front of her and didn't shake her hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn metal bracelet, the kind soldiers wear with a fallen comrade's name engraved on it. He turned it so she could read the inscription. P.O.2 Jake Riley, K.I.A., Helmand Province. "I told you I'd never forget what you did," he said. "Jake's been on my wrist for 2 years. I'm not taking him off. But I want you to know that every time I look at his name, I'll think about the woman who made sure nobody else's name got added to my collection today." Kira touched the bracelet with her fingertip. She nodded. Words weren't enough, and they both knew on it. At 2000, Brennan walked her back to her quarters. The base was quiet. The sky was enormous and filled with stars that didn't care about wars or promises or the weight of a sniper's legacy. "The JSOC assessment starts in 72 hours, Brennan said. "They're sending transport from Bagram." "I know. It won't be easy. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. Harder than today." "I know that too. But you're going." "Yes." He stopped walking. She stopped with him. They stood in the darkness between two buildings, two soldiers at the end of a day that had changed both of their lives. "I want to tell you something," Brennan said. "Something I haven't told anyone." "Okay. I knew your father." Kira's breath stopped. "Fallujah 2009. I was running a joint operation with the 75th. Your father was our overwatch. 3 days on a rooftop, just me and him and a spotter named Garcia. We talk the way you talk when you're lying on concrete for 72 hours with nothing to do but wait. He talked about you. A lot. He showed me a picture. You were maybe 14, 15. You were at a shooting range holding a trophy, and he was standing behind you with this enormous grin. I remember that picture. He told me you were the best natural shooter he'd ever seen. Better than him. Better than anyone. He said it like it was the most important fact in the world, more important than any mission, any target, any war. His daughter could outshoot God, and that was the only legacy he cared about." Kira couldn't speak. She pressed her hand over her mouth and breathed through her fingers and felt the world tilt sideways. "He died 2 weeks later," Brennan said. "I was in the convoy behind his. I heard the explosion. I was one of the first people to reach the vehicle, and I carried him, Kira. I carried your father to the medevac helicopter, and I held his hand, and the last thing he said, the very last words Marcus Ashford ever spoke, were, 'Tell my girl I'm proud.'" The night swallowed her cry. She bent forward at the waist like she'd been punched, and Brennan caught her, held her up, kept her standing the way he'd kept 100 soldiers standing over 17 years of war. "I never found you," he said. "I looked. After the funeral, I tried to find the family, but you'd moved and your mother changed numbers, and I lost the trail. Then 3 weeks ago, a communications specialist walked onto my base, and I looked at her face and I saw Marcus Ashford looking back at me. And I knew. I knew before I pulled the file. I knew before the ambush. I knew before any of it. I've been carrying your father's last words for 7 years, waiting to deliver them." He let her go. She stood on her own. She wiped her face. She looked at him with her father's eyes steady, now clear, the eyes of a woman who had finally received the message she'd been waiting her whole life to hear. "He's proud of you, Kira. He was proud of you then. He'd be proud of you now. And wherever he is, whatever comes after this, Marcus Ashford is watching his daughter, and he's smiling that big, stupid grin, and he's saying what he always said." Kira finished the sentence. She said it out loud, her voice breaking, but sure breaking, but strong breaking, but undefeated. "That's my girl." She went to her bunk. She lay down in the dark with a spent brass casing in one hand and her father's photo in the other. She didn't sleep. She didn't need to. She was done running. She was done hiding. She was done being the girl who promised to stay small so the people she loved wouldn't worry. In 72 hours, she would board a helicopter to Bagram. She would enter a program designed for the most elite warriors in the American military. She would pick up her father's rifle one more time, and this time she would never put it down. But that was later. Right now, in this moment, in the dark of an Afghan night on a base full of soldiers who finally knew her name, Kira Ashford closed her eyes and heard her father's voice one last time. "The bullet goes where your breath goes, baby girl." She breathed out, slow, steady, the way he taught her, and she let the bullet fly.